Hello everybody, my name is Hunter Nolan and this is my English 380 final project. So the topic that I have chosen today is Halloween / spooky themed. I'd call it spooky themed, but anything having to do with monsters, anything like that. And the reason I chose this topic was because I'm a big Halloween guy. I love Halloween, and these books are very unique and non-traditional when it comes to children's literature. We see often in children's literature that, they take a very didactic and lesson-driven story, and, they use wholesome and happy imagery, but these do not. They are very didactic and they are very lesson-driven, but they use dark and ominous imagery instead of, bright, happy colors. They use dark, more foreboding ones to convey the same kind of messages, and it's very unique and very refreshing to see. So that's why I chose it. But the books I chose, the first one I chose, childhood favorite picture book, it's The Halloweener by Dave Pilkey, and this book is about Oscar the wiener dog, and he gets bullied for being a wiener dog, and to make matters worse, his mom gets him a hot dog costume for Halloween, which of course the children make fun of. And they get to all the houses before him, they steal all his Halloween candy. Very, very sad. But then his bullies go into a graveyard and they encounter a large monster, which turns out to be two cats sitting on top of each other. And they fall into the water. So Oscar uses his costume as a boat to rescue them, and by the end of it, Oscar saves them and he's recognized as a hero. So it's all wrapped up. In Dinosaurs Halloween, my second picture book by Eliza Donnelly. We have this kid and his pet dinosaur who go trick-or-treating. It's all going well, all going pretty normal. And then some older kids stop by and make fun of his costume, so they take off his mask, and then when they get to the dinosaur, they take off its mask, and they realize it's an actual dinosaur, and the dinosaur gets pretty peeved off, so he calls his big dinosaur friends to go and scare him off. And by the end of it, the main character gets to steal the bully's Halloween candy. The children's chapter book that I have is called Shadow in the Woods by Max Brallier, and it is exactly what it looks like. It's a compilation of scary stories that all end in cliffhangers. Pretty cool read. And the last book I have is the children's chapter book. It is Goosebumps. It's called Ghost Beach by R.L. Stine, obviously. And this book is about a kid named Jerry who wants to explore this cave on a beach, and his friends tell him, don't do it, there's a ghost there, it's 300 years old, it'll murder you, whatever. Lots of kids go missing there. But of course he goes anyways, or else we wouldn't have a book. So he goes anyways, he gets kidnapped, and the ghost turns out to be two adults posing as a ghost to kidnap children. And the book ends on a cliffhanger when he's kidnapped. And it's pretty dark. So, to get into part 3, 3 trends I see across all these books, or at least one of them, is scary and dark imagery. I mentioned that before. And when I say scary and dark imagery, I mean scary and dark imagery for children's literature. Obviously, if you're an adult reading these books, you probably won't get too frightened. But in terms of children's literature, I would say that there is some pretty scary and dark imagery. An example of that in Halloweener would be, you could choose many pages from this book, but I really like this one because I think it really conveys what I'm talking about. It uses dark colors rather than bright ones. And even when they use yellows, it's still pretty dark around it, and everyone's still pretty scared. So we see the purples and blacks, and we see the silhouette of the monster that we see later in the book. In Dinosaurs Halloween, dark colors are not as present as much, but in this book it's more of an intimidation factor. That's the scary and dark part. We see this on the last page. when all of the big dinosaurs showed up, as I mentioned. And then on this page, we see the dinosaurs chasing after the bullies, which I think is pretty scary and intimidating, especially with how gargantuan those dinosaurs are. And in Shadow in the Woods, you could pick almost any page from this book. I wanted to showcase one of them here. This one. I mean, look at that. Look at how scary this is. This is supposed to be an early reader. And you can see the fear in his eyes. I mean, that's pretty scary and dark, literally and figuratively. In Goosebumps, there isn't actual illustrations, but the words and word choice that is used is pretty scary. And yes, it did give me goosebumps, in case you were wondering. Let me just get to the final page. There's a lot of paratext, so it's kind of hard to find it. Okay. This is the final paragraph in the book. Agatha slammed the kitchen door hard and turned back to Brad. What a pity that dog had to show up, she said, shaking her head fretfully. Now what do we do with these kids, Brad? What do we do with these kids? And that's how the book ends. I think that's pretty scary, at least for a children's chapter book. And the next theme that I noticed across all these books is, I don't think it's the message of all of them, but I think it's a sentiment shared by all of them, and that it's okay to feel fear. A lot of children's books use emotions such as anger, happiness, or sadness to convey a lesson. But in these books, they use fear, and they show that it's okay to feel it, and they show that it's okay, that it's normal. A lot of other children's books don't use fear because they're scared to, ironically. So we see this in Goosebumps. And on page 88, we see, I tried to cry out, but my breath caught in my throat. I tried to jerk free of his grasp, but he was too strong for me. Terry uttered loud, sobbing gasps. She thrashed her arms, struggling to free herself. We see that it's okay to feel that there because they're in a very scary situation. In Shadow in the Woods, we see lots of images here about it's just showing that they're feeling afraid. Right here, see that look on her face, very afraid, very defensive. So, since they're showing that it's okay and that it's normal. And in Dinosaurs Halloween, right before the big dinosaurs show up, we have this scene where they're getting pushed over and laughed at, and you can see it on his face there that he's pretty afraid with the squiggly smile. So that it's okay to feel that when you're getting bullied, and it's all normal. And the Halloweener here. We see this not with the main character, but actually with the bullies, which makes it even funnier. We see it on this page here, where all the bullies are in the water and they're crying out for their moms, I'm assuming, or somebody to save them. Oh. So we see that across all books. And then the final thing that we see is, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the next one, is that the world is not some perfect safe haven. In many other children's works, we see some low stakes conflicts. And I believe that these are low stakes conflicts. I don't think any of these are large scale at all. But I do think it's right to say that this showcases the evilness of the real world. And a lot of other children's books shy away from the real world a lot. And they show that everything's going to be wrapped up in a nice little bow. And we both know that's not the case. That's not true. There are evil people in the world. There are bullies in the world. And we see that throughout the Halloweener with Oscar being made fun of. I mean, there's countless images of him being pointed and laughed at for being a wiener dog. And I think it's great that we're seeing this in children's books. And it's great that we're introducing children to this concept that the world isn't perfect. And, in Shadow in the Woods, there aren't true stories, and they're designed to scare children, but, it doesn't mean that bad stuff can't happen to you. We see the monster there. It doesn't mean that bad stuff can't happen to you. And, in Goosebumps, we see, like I read on the last page about, how these children were kidnapped, and these children were taken away. And obviously that's not a real story, but children being kidnapped has happened before, unfortunately. And in Dinosaurs Halloween, I showed you that image with the kids being bullied and made fun of, and it's a common theme across all books is bullies, and that the world is not perfect. So that was something I noticed across all these. But in terms of class concepts, two of them that I noticed and that I can apply to these books is they all invest in child power, and they're all not patronizing, but they're rather productive. I wanted to talk about child power first, but a lot of these books, adults aren't present. In the Halloweener, it's mainly about Oscar, and it's mainly about how he solves the problem himself. We see his mom here on one page, and then just on one other page we see his mom. And in fact, when his mom gives him the costume, Oscar, it says right here, Oscar does not want to hurt his mother's feelings. So Oscar is really being the mature one and wearing the costume anyways, just to not hurt his mother's feelings, even though he knows he's going to be made fun of. And then of course at the end we see Oscar take action and defeat the monster by himself, and then go save the people who bullied him, which again is very mature for Oscar to do. And then in Goosebumps books, they're pretty infamous for not having adults in there. And in fact, the adults we do see are the ones being evil, and the kids have to figure it out themselves. In Dinosaurs Halloween, the only time we really see adults is when they're trick-or-treating and the main character's parents. But the adults don't even say anything. We just see, trick or treat and thank you. And he's off on his own with his dinosaur, and even the dinosaur is not an adult. You can see that the dinosaur is clearly just as tall as the kid. It might be a small dinosaur, but I think it's representing another child, because he is also a child, so he needs childlike friends. And then the dinosaur who's representing a child solved the problem himself by calling his other dinosaur friends. And then in Shadow in the Woods, there's barely any adults in this book as well. And I know the kids don't solve the problems, but they have to face them themselves, which I think is the important part. It might not end well for them, but it also isn't solved by some overarching adult, some all-knowing wise adult. So I like to see that. And then the next thing is they're not patronizing, but they're productive. I know on your patronizing / productive chart, it mentions something that really stuck out to me. Let me find it real quick. But yeah, a lot of these books use adjectives to describe the text. A lot of it is unexpected, unusual, atypical, smart, complicated, respectful, weird, and sophisticated. Especially weird. That's one of the reasons why I like these books. They're all weird. A lot of scary stories are considered weird. I know that people who read Goosebumps in my class were considered weird. We see this a lot in Shadow in the Woods with the abnormal imagery and abnormal illustration style with the unique eyes there. And even in this book, this takes a very Charlie Brown illustration, so it's very unique. In Goosebumps, again, nobody really wrote children's chapter books designed to scare children until R.L. Stine, so that's very unique and atypical. And Oscar, we see him being smart and respectful. Again, with his mom, he doesn't want to be disrespectful to her by telling her the costume sucks. And he's smart, and he figures out how to solve the problems. So that's my presentation. Thank you for watching.